Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magma Rage's episode 64, our first episode post Boomsday launch. With me, as always, is Pandemonia. Pandemonia, how did you enjoy, or how have you enjoyed the Boomsday project so far?
I've been having a lot of fun. It's actually been one of the more fun sort of release seasons that I've had for quite a while. Lots
Mm.
of cool decks to try out. I've been also trying to grind a bit, with some old decks, but overall, been quite good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this expansion's felt pretty good, I think, as well. There's been a lot of interesting innovation in some decks. I really enjoyed that first day or two just playing some completely new stuff. That was really fun. The meta's kind of settled a little bit since then, though.
Yeah, and unfortunately, not all good things come to an end, and it didn't even last very long until, as we kind of suspected, Druid and Warlocks started being everywhere, and the
Mm.
I mean, my personal stats show I've faced 30% Warlocks,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I mean, I know that's a trivial amount, but I believe from just chatting to some other people, they seem to be also encountering exceptionally high amounts of Warlocks and Druids.
Yeah, the overall stats are somewhere like that. So, I mean, that's fairly accurate. But so it definitely has been very warlock heavy. And at the higher ranks as well, it's been pretty druid heavy. Surprisingly, if you actually look at some of the lower ranks, druid is actually outstripped by some of the other classes, which seems a surprise to us. But like I think from rank 5 onwards and at legend, druid is performing well. And I think that's increasing as well. Um, because of there's been people performing really well with like your Malagos druids and that. But um, anyway, what people really want to know is what the new cards, which new cards are actually worthwhile crafting, which ones are going to be good, which are the ones that they can start getting their hands on if you have that limited dust budget. So, first off, the one big card for me that's really in all decks, and even though it's only a rare, is definitely worth crafting if you want to. That's Giggling Inventor. I mean, Giggling Inventor has been kind of shaping the meta in a way. We're seeing Mossy Horror techs and Blood Knight techs coming in just because of Giggling Inventor.
Yeah, it is a card. I think beforehand in our reviews we rated it was going to be very powerful, very reminiscent of Sludge Belcher kind of. But I think from what it's even been more powerful than Sludge Belcher. Although there are quite a
Yeah.
lot of answers to it, like you say, Mossy Horror and Blood Knights. But like, it's a kind of the thing that makes it both so versatile is that it's good in slower decks, just to slow the board down in terms of just stalling. But it's also really good in aggro decks because it goes wide for cards like Fungalmancer.
Yeah.
So all round, it's just a card. I think basically, no matter what deck you currently play, if you're on a budget, put two Giggling Inventors and your deck becomes a lot better, I think.
Yep. Yeah, it's worked so well in so many decks. As you say, good for control, good for a lot of your like aggressive odd decks as well. So
And
Giggling
even
Inventor, if you don't have it, it's definitely if you're gonna be crafting rares, Giggling Inventor is the one I would want to craft.
just a small side before you go on, and even so much as be making Quest Rogue a thing again.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful in that deck as well. I mean, yeah, Quest Rogues actually had some really good performances quite late into the meta. I mean, over the last couple of days, basically from time of recording here, it's actually hit some really high ranks, and the only change to the deck has just been Giggling Inventor
Yeah,
because the
I
card
think
is
it's.
pretty good.
But yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, moving on to the cards that are actually more important that people want to know about, the legendaries. So it really seems with this set that the class legendaries are where most of the power is at. When it comes to the neutrals, it's maybe just Ziliax that is worth crafting. I know you're kind of a fan of that.
yeah, I think Ziliax is quite. I mean, basically, it's kind of the card that goes into any deck with a mix of shells, so like that with War Gears and what's his Coppertail Imposter. They they seem to be forming the backbone of any sort of aggressive to mid-rangey mech decks. So
Yeah.
Ziliax, if you like any of those decks, Ziliax is a solid craft. I don't think it's 100% necessary for those decks. It's not the card that holds the deck together, but I mean it is good.
Yeah, I mean the surprise to me has actually been how good it's been outside of the three main mech classes.
Yeah.
Notably in the Cube or Death Rat or Rogue decks, it's actually been pretty powerful there because they're playing the Mechanical Whelp, which is actually a mech, as well as the Blight Nozzle Crawlers. So Ziliax actually has a couple targets in a class that we didn't really think would be much of a mech class. And obviously, healing for Rogue, pretty good, especially when they're going to be hitting stuff with that Necrium Blade. So that's actually the one place that Ziliax has really surprised me.
Yeah.
But the rest of the neutrals, pretty meh. I mean, a special shout out, I suppose, to Whizbang, because obviously there's the potential to play with lots of decks, but you are definitely better off if you want to climb the ladder, spending your dust on specific legendaries to play specific decks rather than Whizbang, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a more it's definitely a casual, free to play players kind of dream. So obviously some pros are trying more as a meme, I think,
Yeah,
but
it's like
like
for the pros that are playing it on stream, don't be fooled. It's a way for them to get stream viewers, for them to generate hype for their channel. Like it's a marketing tool for them, and I mean
yeah,
Blizzard were aware of that as well. I think like I got a golden whizbang from my reward for buying the pre bundle on NA, which is exactly the account I want that on as well, because NA is an account that doesn't actually have that many cards. So I have been playing with it a little bit. And I mean, it's not been bad, but that account is at like rank 19 because I barely ever play it. So, could play any half decent deck and beat those people, I'd hope. So, at
yeah,
rank 19. So I think really, it's not going to be the most efficient way to climb, but it is definitely reasonable. The decks are actually fairly reasonable.
yeah,
Okay, so moving on to the class cards. These are the kind of the big ones that are probably worth crafting if you're going to play these classes and if you want to play the decks that they're um, key parts of. Of course, for Druid, Flabidinous Floop and Floop's Glorious Gloop are both pretty powerful. So I think they're both worth crafting. The Gloop more for the token decks, whereas Flabidinous Floop is honestly powerful in a lot of decks. I mean, we're seeing it being used even with like Giggling Inventors sometimes in your slower matchups. In your matchups against faster decks, just so you can get like extra Annoyatrons.
Yeah. I mean, basically in those matchups, being able to play like Giggling Inventor into a 4 mana one is really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, that's where getting it being a 4 mana 3/4 is actually a benefit because that's better than the natural Giggling Inventor body.
Exactly.
And I mean, even in those matchups, I've seen a lot of people play it just off Arcane Tyrant, just so you can play it for free as an extra tempo tool to fight for the board. So I
Yeah.
think Flabinus Floop is proving very, very powerful for a lot of the Druid decks. So if you're going to be playing a lot of Druid, which at the moment Druid looks like it's going to be pretty good, then Flabinus Floop, I think, is probably the best craft in Druid. I think a little
Yeah.
bit over the Gloop, which is a little bit more niche.
Yeah, for sure. Then
Uh,
Hunter and Mage don't really have, don't. There's none of the legendaries are really anything
yeah.
staple.
In Hunter, they're not definitely not worth crafting. In Mage, the class is just not really good enough now, so I wouldn't really suggest crafting any Mage cards to really try and climb ladder. For Paladin, we have Kangor's Endless Army. We'll be talking about it a little bit later with one of the decks. I'm not convinced it's definitely not on the power level, I don't think, of like Flabidinous Floop, but I actually do think it's pretty powerful, and I think being a little bit underplayed right now, in my
Yeah.
opinion and my experience from having played with it. So I definitely think that if you're going to be building a mech paladin deck specifically, then it is going to be a powerful card to play. But it obviously, it's only for mech paladin decks, so it's not going to work in. It's not going to be as versatile across your different paladin decks as something like Forbiddeness Floop would be in Druid.
Yeah, and then none of the priest legendaries, but the one of the big ones. I mean, I think not a surprise in Rogue, and a card that I've actually played quite a bit is Myra's Unstable Element.
Yep.
And I think this is a card that when we were talking about it before Boomsday came out, we were saying how powerful the effect is and which decks wanted it, and it turns out that it's pretty good in basically Odd Rogue,
Yep.
and basically Odd Rogue from pre Boomsday. You dropped a couple of cards, you put Myra's Unstable Element, and all of a sudden,
And Giggling Inventors.
Giggling Inventors, sure. All of a sudden, the deck is still pretty strong, and now it has that additional refill. Well, I mean, I say refill, but it basically gives you that last burst.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
you
a
know,
way
the,
to
the
dig yourself out of bad situations. The key
yeah,
with it is to just not use it too late sometimes when the game is completely lost rather than, finding the right time to use it. I think it isn't always that easy a card to use because it takes
yeah,
some setup to get the best use out of it as well. But yeah, it is definitely a powerful card. The one other place it's actually seen play is Kingsbane Rogue. There's been some
yeah.
Kingsbane Rogue lists, although I don't think the kind of optimal ones are actually running Myers and Stable Element, but it might be playable in those decks as well.
Yeah, mainly for our Rogue, and then onto Shaman. You don't want to say anything more about the Rogue one. Rogue.
No. I mean, Myra herself is probably not worth it. For Shaman, Electra Storm Surge, one of the more powerful scientists as well. We've both played with Electra in a variation of different decks,
Yeah,
and the effect seems pretty powerful in almost all the Shaman decks. So
yeah.
I actually think, if you're going to be playing a lot of Shaman, it almost doesn't really matter what Shaman. I think Electra is probably a good craft.
Except maybe even Shaman.
Yes, okay, sure. Even Shaman doesn't really work there.
But yeah, I mean, being able to, I mean, we're going to be talking a little bit more about like some of her synergies later, but like
Hmm.
everything from healing range to lightning bolts to lightning storms.
And lava bursts in the case of
Exactly.
the aggro
Like,
shaman we built. Yeah. Warlock, I mean, the Solarium is something you can craft, but you can definitely get by playing Zoo without it. So I don't think it's a priority to spend your dust on it. It's a card that might not even make the final cuts in Zoo decks, but I think probably will.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very powerful effect.
Yeah, and Dr. Morrigan is trash, as we predicted.
And then Warrior, unfortunately, so Warrior is a class, unfortunately, is not particularly a strong place.
Mm.
But Doctor Boom has been seen basically nearly every most Warrior decks have been playing Doctor Boom
Yeah.
with or without a mech shell, odd control Warrior, big Warrior, and I mean even for me, I played it a bit. It's just a really powerful Death Knight, a really powerful effect,
Yep.
and it's just the matter of is Warrior is the rest of the cards are the other 29 cards in your deck good enough?
Yeah.
Is the question.
Yeah, I mean, Newsflash, Death Knights are pretty good. Doctor Boom is a pretty good Death Knight as they come, and Warrior really needed it. But as you say, like Warrior's not in a great place right now because of the rest of their cards. So, I mean, Doctor Boom is something if you really enjoy Warrior as a class as well, and you intend to play it a lot, like Pandemonium over there, then it's something that's definitely going to see play in the future as well. Like even in purely control decks, Doctor Boom still seems pretty good. I mean, it's even seeing a lot of play in like the variations of the odd decks, as you mentioned. There's kind of the more control oriented variants, and then there's also the more mech oriented variants, which both of them want Doctor Boom, even though you are going to override that kind of Bagu upgraded hero power.
Yeah, and sort of just to sort of tie in, is it actually synergizes? I mean, like we said with Omega Assembly,
Yeah.
and Omega Assembly is currently seeing play because I think mainly because of that synergy,
Yes.
and obviously the Omega synergy. It's what separates it from the other 1 mana discover cards.
Yeah, I mean it does allow you to get that extra value in the late game, but sometimes you do have to use it for the one. Either
Yeah,
way, it's always a lot better after Doctor Boom.
yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's kind of talk about some actual decks now. So the one, we built a lot of decks in our theory crafting, at least 2 per every class, pretty much,
Yep.
when we were doing our card reviews. So you can check those out if you want to see, how wrong we are and point it out to us if we were wrong about anything in particular. But the one thing we seem to have got right is this Paladin deck that I kind of theory crafted and built before the expansion. I called it Kangor's Endless Annoyance, but that name is actually too long to fit in Hearthstone. So it just got stuck with Kangor's Endless Annoy, which endlessly annoys me because it's not the full name as well.
Oh
So
wow.
it's got some baked in annoyance. But the key here is the deck has a lot of really annoying taunts. I mean, the Stonehill Defenders, Righteous Protectors, pretty annoying. And then, of course, you get the Annoyer modules and the Giggling Inventors. that spawn the Annoyatron. So there's a lot of taunts that have Divine Shield as well. And then just, I mean, there's Ziliax as well, another taunt with Divine Shield. And it's just a lot of really powerful Paladin cards, really. I mean, you got your Sunkeeper Tarims coming, down right after your Giggling Inventors, and even your Meccano Egg. I think Meccano Egg has been the one card I wasn't expecting to perform that well in this deck, but it really did. To give some context, I played this deck. It was probably like day 2 of the expansion or day 3. It was the first weekend of the expansion. That's when it was. And I went 44-15. So 44 wins, 15 losses to Legend from rank 4. So it's like a 75% win rate. Without changing a single card from the Theory Crafted list, which is this list, which that was the thing I was really happy about. I mean, there's maybe a few changes I might have made, but I wanted to stick with that exact deck because, I think it kind of validates a lot of the work we do putting in, all that time into theory crafting those decks, when we can actually take one of those theory crafted decks and take it to Legend. That makes me really happy.
Yeah, and doing some silly. The nice thing is early on, when everything's unrefined, you do have that ability to experiment a little bit more freely. Before being worried about punished by optimized decks.
Yeah. The one other interesting interaction in this deck, which I kind of put in just as something to test originally when we were theory crafting, is the Prismatic Lens. The only spells in the deck are the 2 Spike Ridge Steeds, the Kangor's Endless Army, and a single Dynasize. So you're always going to get a spell that's going to be pretty much cheaper than it costs, unless you hit like Spike Ridge Steed and Sunkeeper Tarim. That's the only way you're going to get a spell to even equal its cost. So a lot of the times, that actually allows you to do pretty powerful things, getting like a cheaper Spike Ridge Steed for a future turn, or I did hit 1 or 2 1-mana Dynasizes on my way to Legend. Then you can just slap that on the board and deal 10 damage. The Dynasize definitely comes as a shock to most people because they're not really expecting to see it in the deck. So I've been really happy with the way that Prismatic Lens has actually performed in this deck.
The memes are alive.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that's been pretty big is Nightmare Amalgam. Because Paladin actually has a pretty good 4-cost magnetic card in a Noya module, you really want to have that 3-cost mech. And the 3-cost mechs in this set have been pretty underwhelming to me. So Nightmare Amalgam, just as a 3-mana 3/4, that, it is all types. So it is a mech. That has actually worked pretty well, I think, to just provide that body that sometimes when you slap an Annoyance module on it, you can completely dominate the board.
Yeah, and then, like you say, good old, what's the Kangor's Endless Army is the card also that kind of plays quite a big role in the deck, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something where, particularly if you do draw it early on, you want to kind of plan your mechs a little bit around it if possible. If you have the leniency to maybe hold back a Glowtron, or something like that to make your Kangor's Endless Army more consistently good, that is definitely something you want to consider. It's one of the reasons I'm not playing stuff like Mekaru in this deck, or some of those other kind of cheap mechs, because they can make that pool a little bit weaker. And the one big thing is that, as you mentioned, there was a lot of Druid and Warlock on the ladder, and this deck performed pretty well against both of them. I had very, very favorable win rates against Druid and Warlock. So, I mean, that's one of the big things that the deck helped me, or was good for, with helping me get to Legend. I mean, against Zoo, you've just got really annoying ways to fight for the board with all these taunts and Divine Shield. And against Druids, you can kind of, by sticking your minions together, you allow yourself to go tall rather than going wide, which means you don't get as punished by cards like Spreading Plague and that. Yeah, so you just kind of need to play around, maybe like the Naturalize or something. It's better to sometimes have 2 big bodies than 1 super big body on the board, for instance.
Yeah, and also just like you're saying, is like, again, like the thing is, even though the deck is inherently, let's say, weak against silence, the thing is you've got so many buffs and so many things to silence that eventually they can't silence everything, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for you.
Yeah, it was 10-2 versus Druid and 16-5 versus Warlock. So, that worked out pretty well The worst matchups were actually Shaman, although I didn't face many of it. And obviously, that's just because they have cards like Earth Shock if they're running that, and Shadowwalk Shaman and Hex, which are pretty good against the deck.
Yeah.
But speaking of Shaman and good cards, we have a Shaman deck for you to look at next. And this is kind of something that's just been called Good Shaman, a deck mostly created by Ike and played by himself and Zalay and Crane on their streams. But Pandemonia has been playing a bit as well. Tell us a little bit about this deck.
So yeah, this is kind of the deck has it's kind of like a value based deck. It's like it's like a sort of a mid rangey deck. It's got a lot of really cool interactions, like a lot of fun things. So like if you see, it's got cards like it's got actually both. It's one of the few decks that runs like two of its Death Knights. So it's got Thrall as well as Hagatha.
Yeah.
And Thrall, synergize. You've got cards like your Corridor Creeper and Sonar Chain Gang, but the new inclusions include obviously Giggling Inventor.
Yeah.
That with Thrall as well as Unstable Evolution allows for some silly shenanigans as well as boards. Like I said, the Fungalmancer goes well with things like Giggling Inventor.
Yeah, and Giggling Inventor also goes well with Shadowwalk at the top end of the deck.
Yeah, so Shadowwalk, basically in this deck, you'll see it has Shadowwalk, but it's not like the Shadowwalk Shaman where it's pure combo. And yeah, basically when you play Shadowwalk a lot of times, you just get quite a big board because a lot of times your Shadowwalk copies itself, and then you summon some Annoyance, and then Thrall happens, and you get a board consisting of a bunch of Snow Fury Giants usually, and some other 3-drops.
That sounds pretty good.
So, and then, the card we're chained by Electro Storm Surge. In this deck, the synergies are with Unstable Evolution. And a funny interaction we found is if you play Electro Storm Surge with Unstable Evolution, you actually get 2 Echo copies. Not that it actually does relevant, but you get 2 Echo copies. There, Lightning Bolt and Lightning Storm are the other synergies, just to clear.
The Lightning Storm and Lightning Bolt are very important to help this deck fight against, Zoo in particular. I mean, even with the double Mind Control tech as well, another card that can be pretty powerful against those Zoo decks. So, I mean, this deck actually, it's kind of almost a traditional mid-range deck in a way. Good minions, some good removal, and then just a lot of value to kind of win out the late game a lot of the time. So, I mean, I think it's definitely a pretty good deck to try. Not that many new legendaries, but it is kind of expensive, a little bit like the Paladin deck. I mean, we're looking at 14,000 dust total here.
Oh wow, I didn't actually realize. Yeah, it's got 7 legendaries. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I mean, Shadowwalk, Lich King, Kalamos, Hagatha, Thrall, Electra, and Keleseth. So, I mean, Keleseth and Lich King are probably pretty reasonable ones that I expect most people to have, and they're pretty good to have anyway. And then if you've been playing a lot of Shaman, having Hagatha, Kalamos, and Shadowwalk is not unlikely. I mean, you really do want to have the Thralls as well. As you say, it does have that random extra synergy with Shadowwalk as well. But yeah, I mean, maybe something like Stormbringer could be a replacement for Thrall if you happen to open that instead.
Yeah.
It is something that could see some use in this deck, but it's not. It doesn't have as good a synergy with cards like Giggling Inventor and Corridor Creeper.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that you could Giggling Inventor is not quite Doppelgangster, but you still got that potential turn 10, Giggling Inventor plus Thrall as a sort of a refill, as like a refill of the board in one turn.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, what is the we've kind of mentioned this deck being pretty good against Zoo. I mean, I think it's pretty decent against Druid as well. We don't really have as good a stats to back this one up, or at least we don't have enough of our own stats to back it up. But fundamentally, I mean, it also can build some pretty big boards, as you say, with some of the Evolve synergies stuff, and that can really help as well against the kind of Druid decks. So it should do pretty well in the current meta, and we have seen a decent number of pros at least performing really well with the deck.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, Ike and his crew of like Zalay and Crane,
Yeah.
I think they made rank one legend with it. I think Crane did,
Yeah, I think Crane did.
and then quite a lot of people have been doing quite well with it.
Yeah, they've been
Uh,
streaming a decent amount of it as well, so it's good to check out their streams. Sometimes all three of them are streaming whilst they're all on the same call together anyway. Or like yesterday, I was watching Crane's stream and a really groggy Zalay came in. Like I barely even recognized his voice. That's how like groggy he was because he obviously just woken up because it was only the morning in America. So yeah, I mean, these are two really interesting decks to try out. They're a little bit on the more expensive side, but make sure you to check next week's episode. We'll be back maybe with some cheaper decks once the metas settle down a bit and we have more idea of what are the more solid crafts as well. And we'll also, we'll just keep providing decks in these early days of the Boomsday expansion. But speaking of early days, there was also another HCT event, HCT Germany.
Summer.
Yeah, HCT Germany Summer. Yeah, this is the second HCT Germany event, and like the last one, it had an offline qualifier portion an online qualifier portion that led to a top 16 offline event at the Take TV studios. There were some notable players that qualified, like Tice. This qualification and stuff was all done before the Boomsday launch, so this was one of the very, very first tournaments really on the new with the new expansion out, and we saw a kind of variation between players bringing some newer stuff, but mostly sticking to existing archetypes that were performing well. And when you have, your profession on the line here, HCT points and a decent amount of money, that's completely understandable that a lot of those players had some more safer choices, like, the Token Druids and Shadowwalk Shamans and Malygos Druid, which was particularly popular.
Yeah, Malygos Druid was kind of the headliner of the tournament. It basically 16 of the top 16 brought Druid. They all brought Druid.
Yeah.
And 12 of those Druids were Malygos Druid, which is quite a large number. I don't need, I mean, that's 80% basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And for that to be one archetype is quite a lot. Obviously, like you're saying, people that tend to stick to sort of safer strategies.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was Druid was popular. Warlock was also not very surprising, very popular. 13 out of the 16 brought it.
Yeah.
And then Rogue, 10 out of 16 brought Rogue.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is to not make too big a read into, these are the number one decks right now. These players had to take minimal risks in this kind of early stage of the expansion. Once again, you kind of have to just take the highest percentage line, and therefore they want to play decks that they know how to play and that have proven themselves a little bit more than some of the new decks. So, it's not just oh no, the new cards suck, which was like the prevailing thought of Twitch chat in the times I watched. But I think much like Twitch chat usually do, they were pretty much just memeing.
Yep.
In terms of results, Trek came out as the winner, I believe. I think Tice came in the top 4. I think he lost in the semi-final, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he lost in the semi-final to Calix, I think.
Yeah, the French player.
Yeah. So the French did quite well, I think, in the tournament.
Yeah, there was quite a few French representatives there that qualified.
Yeah. So also, once again, just a sort of a mention, Cassie, I think once again top 16, which I mean I think is quite just. He's been having. I don't think he's won a big tournament so far, but I mean he's been doing very well in a lot of it.
Yeah, I think it's at least his fourth, maybe just third, but at least his fourth top 16, I think. This year already, which is a pretty great achievement. I mean, he hasn't quite been keeping up with Hunter Ace.
I was about to say, not
Fino
Hunter Ace
in terms of points, because Fino also does great on ladder. But he's definitely, putting in a really stellar performance this year, and is definitely going to be one to watch if he does manage to qualify for the World Championships, and obviously one to watch at the summer playoffs as well. Yeah, and just also genuinely a nice guy from when I actually met him at DreamHack Tours.
Yeah, it's just because you both like Rogue. I think you're biased.
Yeah, but I mean, he was a nice guy. Maybe he liked me because I like Rogue, but like, yeah, he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all we have for this week's episode. A relatively short one. We're going to be back once again with more decks. If you have any decks you want us to try out, we'll try them out. We've been doing a lot more streaming on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/D1B underscore. There's nothing after the underscore. It just ends in underscore. So, we've been co-oping a lot there. As I said, I already got to Legend with the Mech Paladin, so we've mostly been playing I've been spectating Pandemonia whilst he plays and tries to get to Legend. So we've been playing a variety of decks. If you have any suggestions for decks you want to see us play, come check out the stream or leave some comments on the YouTube videos, and we'll make sure to give the decks a look. Maybe try them out, and if we like them, we'll feature them on next week's episode.
Yep.
So thank you, everyone. Make sure like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But from us here, cheerio.
Cheerio.